Okay, this is video 26 already. I'm going to talk about cults being a unwanted, I guess, distraction in life, taking you down a path you weren't expecting. I think back to when I got recruited in 1995. I was at a shopping centre, Prince's Mead Farnborough, and there's this bloke invites me along to a church service and Bible study. Little did I know it would be an all-consuming distraction. All-consuming distraction. I've put here, it's like climbing up the wrong mountain. You know, if there's a mountain range and you climb up the wrong mountain, not only do you have to climb down that wrong mountain, you've got to start again and then climb up the right mountain, which can be exhausting. And it's a bit like that if somebody has been in a cult, I don't know, 10 years, 20 years, whatever. Some people I've seen, they've spent their whole lifetime in a cult, and then, you know, they might leave a cult. I've seen Jehovah's Witnesses leave it in the sort of 70s or 80s. But it's a good thing to leave it. But it's almost like, well, I didn't get to live the life I wanted to live, and now I'm really depressed about that fact because I was led astray. Yeah. I mean, for some people, you know, they might have chosen the wrong career in life. I remember in the university days, many years ago, 30 odd years ago, I met somebody and she said, "Oh, I'm doing the wrong course, I'm going to quit uni." This was the days when university was free. But, you know, it's that point in life, whether somebody's in a cult or a career or a relationship or whatever it is where they live, and they just say, "No, this is wrong. This isn't what I want. I'm not living the life I want to live." Some people get kicked out of a cult, and then it's like, "Oh, I got to start again." But it's not only starting again, it's coming down off the mountain and understanding why you made the wrong choices. You know, when I think to that fateful day, January 1995, 31 years ago, that decision, I guess the guy was pushy. You know, "Yeah, you'll love it," you know. So I said yes, and I went along the next day. Then I fell into the trap of the cult. But it's making sense of how you were misled. How was I misled? Well, it was a friendly invitation to a church. You know, that's what I thought. And they kept on telling me, "Well, this is what God wants for your life." Well, hang on a minute. What happened to what I wanted for my life? You know, and more than that, it wasn't what God wanted. It was what some cult leader had constructed in their sort of thought reform program. And these thought reform programs, indoctrination, brainwashing, call it what you like, they can put you on a completely different path. Yeah. And it's almost like you've got your old life, which was whatever you were doing. For me, I'd got a degree at uni. I was working as an engineer, you know, and I thought, okay, you know, life's going okay. When I went to the church cult, I thought, oh, I could get a girlfriend here. You know, maybe I'll get married. What I didn't know at the time was they decide who gets married or who gets divorced. And they say it's all from God, but it's people dictating what other people will do in life. Yeah. In a certain extent, you could say, well, your boss decides whether you get promoted or not, or fired or not, or whatever. So we do live in a world where other people obviously influence massively, you know, but usually, uniquely with a cult, they're telling you, well, this is what God wants you to do. Not, oh, I think it would be good if you go here, there and everywhere. In the cult I was a part of, people were moved from one location to another location, from one country to another country. And it's like, yeah, sure, I'm sure it's an interesting experience, but it's not your choice, it's somebody else's choice. There's a concept in psychology known as the locus of control, where you decide what you want to do. You decide what you want to learn, who you want to have friends or relationships or get married to. You decide where you want to live. You decide what career you want to do or no career. You know, you're in control. Are you going to make mistakes? Of course you do. Everybody makes mistakes. But when you hand that control over to somebody else who pretends to be God's prophet or, you know, chosen by God, as a lot of these arrogant cult leaders assume, then it's not your life anymore. And this is the big kicker for a lot of people when they leave a cult. I wasn't living my life. You know, you might have thought, like myself, oh well, I'm going to get married, I'm going to do this, that and the other. And yet they can just take it away at any time. I remember in the cult, you know, London ICOC, then London ICC, divorces caused by the cult leader. You know, somebody doesn't want to go to church as much, oh, you should divorce them. That's massive. That affects their whole life. And as I said here, cults are a massive distraction in life, usually for the worse, because you're not making the decision. The only correct decision anyone makes in a cult is to leave. You know, that's the only correct decision, is to leave, and, you know, maybe find a healthy church that isn't dictating and micromanaging your life. And as I said, it's a distraction. For me, the distraction was from 1995, when I was in my early 20s, to roughly about 2015, when I guess I was in my early 40s. So that 20s and 30s, you know, maturing in life and making my own decisions was completely, you know, it wasn't me living my life, really. Which it's regrettable, because you can't just turn the clock back. Another thing to think about is, you know, I've used the analogy of climbing up the wrong mountain. It's like you get to the top of the mountain and then you look over and you think, this is the wrong mountain. And then you've got to climb all the way back down and then start again. And of course, a lot of people in life who've put their effort into career or money or family or whatever, they will have done better. But some people chase money and they chase career and their relationships are terrible, but they've got a ton of money to show for it, but they're depressed. Other people have put a lot of effort into friends and family. You know, they might have a good social life, nice holidays, but they might be broke all the time. But with the cult, it wasn't you making the decisions, because they pretend it's all from God. So the depression can be a very deep, back down to the valley of, well, I'm starting again. For me, I'm trying to get back into electronics. That's what I got a degree in. So here I am in my 50s, you know, 10 years after the cult, it was just mental breakdowns and trauma and not doing very well at all. But you do recover. And so for me, maybe 30 years after that fateful invite, it's like, oh, okay, I'll get some books on electronics and see if I can, you know, even if I don't succeed, it is me making the decision, which is what life is about. You know, you making the decision, and whether it works or whether it doesn't work, you know, at least it was your decision. But you don't get that in a cult. I've put another analogy. It's like building a building, but it's not according to plans, where you have to tear it all down again. You know, it's like these builders who build things and then, you know, they've built it wrong. Not only have they wasted all of that resources, they then have to tear it down and maybe rebuild it, or maybe the person can't afford to rebuild. So I've put here, what's the usual plan in life? You know, in the Western world, people get educated, they learn a skill or a trade, they get a job, maybe they go to uni, you know, you get married, you have kids, focusing on family, personal goals, things you like, watching football, you know, playing sport, whatever it is, some hobby, train spotting, you know, and you do what you want to do. And you kind of feel, well, at least I'm doing what I want to do in life. But with a cult, the trick they play is, oh, no, God's got this plan for you. I remember this Seeking God study in ICOC, and it was, you know, don't worry about what to do. God's got a plan for you. He'll take care of you. You have to put him first. So it's almost like switch off your decision-making process. The leaders will tell you what to do, and they're pretending it's from God. And it gives them such a narcissistic feed that they're telling other people what to do. They're addicted to the control that being a cult leader or a leader in a cult gives them, because they get to tell other people what to do. You know, and they're very good at manipulating minds. In fact, that's their job, is to manipulate and deceive people, which is a bit sick, isn't it, when you think about it? And of course, if you reject the leader, then you're rejecting God. So it's not the leader. I always remember this saying that the cult leader in the London ICC, Michael Williamson, used to say, well, you're not rejecting me, you're rejecting God. So, and God decides whether you go to heaven or hell. So you have to obey the preacher, or you're going to go to heaven or hell. You know, it's that, you know, that twisted. And they always say, oh, if you put God first, he'll bless you. And of course, there's no proof of any kind of God. And where's the blessings? People are always chasing the blessings or the reward. And that's why a lot of people leave, because they think, well, hang on a minute, you told me God was going to take care of me, and hang on a minute, there's no proof it even exists. So you're relying on something that you can't even prove exists to take care of your life. You know, and you've given up your life for that thing that you can't prove exists. So when somebody might be 70 or 80 years old and then they suddenly become an atheist, it's like, wow, my whole life was a complete waste of time. A complete waste of time. But even if they get a little bit of insight, a few years of, wow, the world is messed up, isn't it? At least you know the world is messed up. So it's tragic if people give up their life, and we don't know whether it's their only life or not. We don't know if there's an afterlife. Indirectly, to just make the leaders richer, like these televangelists. People making themselves poor, so some multi-millionaire preacher can just fly around the world in luxury. So sick and twisted, isn't it? But this concept of manipulating people and, oh, it's for the greater good, or it's for God, or whatever, this has been going on for thousands of years. Thousands of years. People, I guess they gave up their lives to build the pyramids, or the Roman Empire, you know, or the Greek Empire, or whatever, under these usually religious, crazy people. I mean, imagine generations of Egyptians and worshipping their gods, and then somebody comes along and proves to them their gods are just part of their imagination. There's no proof they exist. That's the real, wow, okay. You know, some people call it, it's a bit like a sort of midlife crisis. Which is why I warn people to avoid cults. Right, I've used up my 15 minutes again. There we go. We'll do another video next time.